Hey, I'm Chris, the outreach pastor, and welcome to episode 25 of the Reunion Church podcast. This is Sunday Recaps, where we discuss a couple key points from the previous service and help you navigate the spiritual formation process. And so we just finished a new series, new year, new series. We finished Ordinary Life, we finished Grace Talk, and now we started a new series as a church on our values, kind of what we are, what we do. Before we kind of just jump into, the message, how Sunday night kind of went, kind of recapping, what's the point of going over the values of a church? Because every church has their wall of we believe these things, we stand for these things, and they never talk about it. What's the importance of actually talking about our values as a church?
Yeah. So, and they probably talked a lot about it when they first planted. They probably talked a lot about their values and such of hey, this is what's important to us. And there's a few churches that I've heard every once in a while that will bring up hey, this is a really important value to us, because you need to preach from the pulpit quite often, what is really important, what's your culture?
Yeah.
Your values are essentially your constructs of what your culture really is, what you guys are seeing as important, and the direction that you're kind of going. And there's usually values are kind of broken down a little bit more. So you do have your actual values of this is what's important to us. This is how we structure a ministry, or why we would even start a ministry is if it lines up in a value. But then we also have our vision, which would be more of hey, this is the direction that we are going, that we need to row in, right? So how do I help us all understand the vision of this is where we're trying to row our boat in the direction to? And then you actually have your mission, which is what's the end goal? What's the end point that we're trying to end up to? Mm-hmm. So when you lay those things out, it gives clarity of why are we even here? What are we even trying to do itself?
What's the point? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So it is really important that everyone has that and defines it, not only for your ministry, but for yourself. I've known people that have set it up for their own families. I've known people that have set it up for, you hear about it in businesses, which usually we all end up making fun of because no one really cares.
It's cheesy and dumb. Yeah.
Super cheesy. But yeah, there's a lot of importance behind it, because it is hey, this is why we even exist. It's Simon Sinek's Sinek?
Sneaky. Simon Sneaky. Yeah, let's just call him that.
Yeah, he wrote that book, Start With Why, which it really taught that's what it is.
Yeah.
Why am I even here? And that's what your mission, vision, and value statements really should all be pointing towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and last night we kind of talked about our mission statement, which is arguably maybe the most important part of your value system. It's kind of the foundation, the core of where everything else kind of grows from. When it comes to, say, the core team, the pastors, and, our audience, our church, what do they really need to know when it comes to a mission statement? Because sure, a mission statement is kind of our canopy of this is our mission, this is what we're going to do. But a mission statement can mean a lot of things depending on the audience. What does your churchgoer need to know about the mission statement of their church, or our church specifically?
Yeah. In general, what you need to know about the mission statement is, does it align with what's really important, with a why for you? And mission statements for the church always should be pretty easy to understand. They should align exactly with the mission of Jesus, of the kingdom of God is here.
Yeah.
And it's at hand, and we are proclaiming it, and we are doing everything we can to depopulate hell. That's all there is to it. And we just find different ways to say it and make it sound a little more creative and make it sound different. And so that's the end point of a mission statement, and what you should be looking for in your church's statement is does it align necessarily with what Jesus actually says? Because it should be exactly here's the big picture of why we even exist as a church itself.
Yeah.
And so if you can get behind that, you have perfect. That's great. And the church obviously should be matching up with that, right?
Yeah.
And for us, it's that we want to see people that will be redeemed, restored, and reunited to God. That all people would be redeemed, restored, and reunited to God. And it's, again, pretty self-explanatory. We want to see people getting saved. We want to see people being restored right with God, with their relationship, and we want to see unity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess just to jump on that, like, why is there such a disconnect when people hear mission statement? It's like one of two reactions of like either super empowered, super passionate about what an organization, church, business is doing. And then there's the other side of it of like, oh, corporate wants to share their values with us again. We're going to have like a 3 hour meeting with all these people we've never heard of before, talk nonsense for hours. Like, what's the difference between empowering somebody and just absolutely boring somebody with a mission statement? Because like what you said, it sounds cool, but why does it sound cool? Like, where's the disconnect for a lot of people?
Yeah. It's because we have like those Baptist roots, so it all starts with R, and that's
Yeah.
what people absolutely love. It so yeah, and I'm one of those guys that always makes fun of, my manager or my manager's manager
Yeah.
in like the Zoom meetings with all the rest of the team of like, oh my gosh, we have another one of these meetings going on to talk about how great this new mission statement is or value, right? Because they're so they don't matter. Like they might say this is what it is, but then you live in the culture and you're like, you don't mean this. You don't actually
Yeah.
do this. You don't put the customer first. You
Mhm.
don't care, like you care about money, right? If you
Yeah.
made that your mission statement, like we want to make the stockholders most happy so that I make the most money, people probably would be like, cool, all right, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like, but at least you're honest. But a lot of times we'll create mission statements or things that like the company does not line up with. And
Yeah.
so it's, you have your constructs of like, hey, this is what we say we are, but the culture and the conviction of the leadership team isn't lining up. And so it's a huge issue that we see and why people just don't take it serious. And but why for other like nonprofits or some things that kind of get going where people really agree. We're like, yeah,
Yeah.
no, like actually I will get behind this. I will stand and actually support this and come alongside and get excited around it. When you hear about a mission, that's usually what you think about is like a military or some task at hand that I'm going to go complete.
Yeah.
So it should be very easy to understand. I need to know my mission and why I'm actually going after this. What is it that I actually need to be doing? What's the end objective that I can agree with?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just to give a little context here too, as far as like mission statements, vision statements, a lot of how we kind of approach that is influenced by a lot of people. But one resource that kind of inspired our outlook on it was Designed to Lead by Eric Geiger and Kevin Peck. So if you guys are curious what we mean by a lot of this lingo, because we're going to use a lot of this lingo throughout the podcast, it's inspired by resources like that book, where church leaders, church leadership is kind of structured this way of mission statement, vision, values. So kind of going back to what we're kind of discussing though, in regards to the average churchgoer, why do they need to know the mission statement? Like how does that affect them? What does that change as far as their outlook of their day-to-day church life, their day-to-day spiritual life?
So for us, why it's important that we've actually taken the time for people to understand our mission statement, why they understand our values, all that, because the reality is that it's not the church's responsibility to save people.
Yeah.
It's not the church's, it's your responsibility. The church as an organization or as an institute, we're not the one, like that is not the institute to save people.
Yeah.
Despite what people have gotten used to, where it's like, oh, hey, I'm just going to bring in someone of my friends and such.
Right.
That's not the case anymore. Like you are the person who should be empowered and equipped to go out and save someone, you alone.
Yeah.
And it's important that we understand this mission statement when you're part of our church. It's saying, no, you are the one to go out and to be used by God to see people redeemed, restored, and reunited back to Him. It's not, hey, give the money so that the church can do this, so that the leadership
Right.
team can get the best training for it, so that they can do that. We are going to equip and empower you to go out and do this. This is your mission. We're here to empower you and equip you to do it because we can't fall into that trap anymore of thinking that it's the church's institute's responsibility to save people. It was never given to the church. It was given to the individual.
Mhm. And where does that idea kind of come from? Because like a lot of people are going to hear what you just said and be like, well, that's nonsense. Like this is how this works. We pay you, you do the church thing, and we kind of just benefit from you working really hard. We show up to your concerts, we show up to your events, we tithe, and then you listen to us because we gave you money, right? That's the exchange, that's the transaction. Where did that whole idea come from, and why is that completely flawed?
Yeah, and to track it back, I mean, I root it back to the Industrial Revolution. I root it back to that age.
Yeah.
There was a lot of good things going on during the church age during that time. And it is the idea of, well, you're the hired, like, this is your job. You are hired to go and do this, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
that's in your job description. You're the only person who actually gets paid to go out and do the work of God.
Right.
And the idea of a full-time pastor and multiple pastors on staff, a larger staff, that's relatively new. That is like pretty new in the Industrial Revolution, and honestly within the last couple hundred years at the most.
Yeah.
And what happened during the Industrial Revolution, what you saw was where people would sit back and you would have the big crusades with Billy Sunday or D.L. Moody and even Billy Graham. And they saw an opportunity to attract people and bring people in to these large crusades to see people get saved.
Yeah.
And it's not that people just came because they're like, oh, hey, I really want to hear D.L. Moody or Billy Graham talk. They had something that drew people in. And they would use every type of resource that they could to draw people in to get them to come. And for D.L. Moody and Billy Sunday and some of these guys, they used electricity. Electricity had just come out. And so they had these big tents. Hey, come and see electricity, see what's happening. And people would flock to come and see, what is this new electricity stuff that's coming to town? And that's where they preached the gospel message.
Yeah.
And that started essentially almost a consumeristic mindset for Americans of like, what can I actually get kind of out of this? What's going to entertain me? And that was the trend that you started to see across churches, where it was like, hey, what's bigger, what's better, what's the best thing to draw people into the church, right? Let's draw as many people in and save as many people as we can, because also that's how people learned at that point as well. Of they weren't the most educated. It was harder to learn that way. D.L. Moody was a prime example where he didn't have a great education. He didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so eventually he just, like, you would sit at people and you would listen to them. Well, today's day and age is very different. I can see the greatest and latest technology just by searching it online. I don't need to go someplace and actually see it. I don't go to Best Buy to see the greatest technology anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I see the press release online, or, get whatever I want on TikTok to see the greatest snippets of it,
Yeah.
And same thing with education. The way I learn now, I don't necessarily trust any education system anymore.
Yeah.
I don't expect people to preach at me. Even schools are trying to change this around, where they're like, people don't learn from being preached at. People can find that anywhere online from YouTube, but they're saying, hey, someone come alongside and learn this with me. That's what's really trending. That's what people like. They want to walk through those stories. That's where the deconstructionists are making a lot of progress, because they're, hey, I'm trying to deconstruct my faith. Why don't you come alongside with me?
Yeah.
And people are very interested of like, wow, I've never, like, yeah, I'll come on this journey with you. And so we have to teach and be prepared of like, well, I'm not going to expect people to come into these doors all the time anymore. It has to be you. Hey, you go alongside with someone and help them understand this. Don't preach at them. Don't think you're going to have the greatest, but come alongside with someone.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be that personal relationship coming alongside with someone that is going to change. It's not going to be the greatest attraction anymore.
Right. It's more so that invitational aspect versus the old school instructional of where this is how you do things. This is how you preach the gospel. This is how you share your faith. Whereas nowadays it's more of, hey, I'm going through a lot. Can I just talk? Like,
right.
How a lot of conversations start of like, hey, I got some doubts about this. Can we get coffee? Like, it's never like, oh, I did the homework, did the paperwork, like it used to be back in the day of like, oh, now I've got it all together. There's definitely been a paradigm shift. Do you think this shift is going to keep going? This shift from instructional to invitational ministry, where the way we approach people is going to keep changing? Because it seems like there was a pendulum that kind of swung, so to speak.
Yeah. And I would agree. Like that's how it's going to continuously move in that direction for quite some time. It'll probably move back. I think, Chris, you'll talk a lot about a certain book that you read about how we'll swift and go back and forth in a few different directions.
Yeah.
And throughout history, we've seen where people have kind of learned this way before.
Hmm.
And I think that's what we're going to see is this will stay for a while. This will be the
Yeah.
new age for a couple decades that people will learn this way. And then people get tired of it, and then they'll go to a different way of want that logical teach at me and instructional. How do you say it? Instructional versus
Invitational. I just made that up.
invitational. Yeah, that was really good. I liked it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I think it's going to stay this way for a while, especially as we've moved away from like a logical way of thinking into more of a spiritual, like emotional way of thinking instead.
Yeah. And to clarify, neither one is wrong. It's just
Right.
it's
It's a cultural
how
preference.
people,
It's
yeah, it's a preference. It's how people learn. And
yeah,
it's just that we see this with generations, right? We had the baby boomers and they did their way of life. And then the next generation was like, we're just not going to do that. And then the next generation after that was like, oh, this generation is trash. And the cycle always repeats itself of like, whatever happened before has to be resisted. That's just how every generation is wired. It's why Gen X and millennials can't stand Gen Z because they're different and they're doing things their own way. And then after Gen Z was Gen Alpha, you're like, oh, but man, Gen Alpha is the worst. And that's just how people are. We just keep changing and changing and changing. I guess just to go back to churchgoers hearing the mission statement and all that stuff. Okay, they understand the call, they understand the mission. So what are the next steps? What do they need to do with what they've heard with the mission statement? So like people at Reunion Church, sure, we need to redeem, restore, and reunite all people to God. What do they need to do to start that process? Like, what does that actually look like to go about that? Because like a mission statement's one thing, but how do you put that into practice?
yeah. In a lot of our discipleship training and in more normal discipleship training itself, there's an aspect called silos. And we usually think of silos as a bad thing, but the silos are your sphere of influence, people that you specifically will only have interactions with.
Yeah.
And when we have those silos, those are the areas that God has given you an opportunity to go and practice the mission, to go and be the mission for. And when you understand the mission, and whether that's the Reunion Church mission or whatever the mission really is, it's all the same from God. There's the people then of how do you go reaching out to them, right? How do you go out and reach each one of these people in your silos? And your silos can be in different areas. My silo is inside the gym and inside the strongman community. My silo is at the Reunion Coffee House, where I spend a good amount of time as well. And so those are two unique silos where I've built different relationships with people, communities. My other silo is my work, because I have unique relationships with people there that if I went to another church or if I talked to someone else, they don't have those relationships. And so there's people within inside of there that I am tasked to be on mission with. And so you think through, okay, who are the people that need to be redeemed? Who are the people that are in your silo that are completely lost in the first place, that have never heard the message, that have never heard about Jesus Christ in the first place, that you can share that with? And you just share, and we're going to talk through the blessed technique, which is it's our preferred way of evangelism. Like there's tons of different ways that people talk about it, but this way it's just a very natural process of evangelism that is more relational based and discipleship based, rather than a shotgun approach of tell everyone everything about Jesus at one moment. And
yeah, it works so well nowadays.
Yeah. So you think about those people that just need to hear about Jesus for the first time, and you just be in prayer for them. You listen, you find a way to do something extra for them, or honestly just eat with them. You go out of your way and serve them, and then you can share with them. That's the blessed technique. And that's how you share the gospel with someone who's never heard it before. Who are the people that need to be restored? People who had walked with God for a long time, but are just now like they've been through. We heard a lot last night about how many people have either been hurt by the church themselves or know people who have been hurt by the church. And it's pretty alarming, actually. It's many of our stories personally, but just how many people know, oh yeah, this is why my friends will not talk about Jesus, will not go to church. They still are fine with God and we're fine with Jesus, but they don't want to engage in the conversations. They don't want to deal with this stuff because of what they're facing, because of the church hurt that they've been through. And so they need to be restored back into community, back into relationship, because God created the church for a reason. It is biblical. It isn't something for us to walk away from. And it's the deconstructionists, like, who are the people that you know that can be restored back? And obviously you want to be sensitive. That's where you really need to listen to their story, really need to hear what they've been going through and hear what they are deconstructing.
Yeah.
But walk with them in it. And who are those people in your silos that are there? And then who are the people that need to be, oh shoot, I'm pulling a blank on the last word. Redeem,
restore, reunite.
Reunited.
Yeah.
Who are the people that have just truly walked away, right? The reunited are the people that have truly walked away completely, who, yeah, they follow Jesus and believe in God, but they're one step further than a deconstruction, where they are just completely done with God, done with all religion. They don't acknowledge it. They don't want anything to do with it, right? And so that usually comes from a wrong expectation they had from the Bible, the wrong expectation of how Christianity was explained to them. And they need to be reunited with their God, because they had this wrong expectation that God never actually gave them, that they expected God to kind of do, and you walk through them with it. And so each one of us definitely has people in those areas. And we don't want to just focus on those who are lost. We want to focus also on those who need to be redeemed and restored and reunited. Who are the people that we can kind of walk alongside with and help and support? Because those are the people that honestly, often the world has kind of given up on.
Yeah.
The people that the world doesn't want to deal with, the people that have turned to drugs or have turned to other highs. And a lot of times the world just doesn't see any hope for them.
Yeah.
And
or even worse, the church usually gives up first before the world gives up.
Right. Yeah. You know, well, I handed them over to Satan. Well, okay, that's not what that means. You need to
yeah.
Right.
Right.
So
yeah. And it's so tough too, because like a lot of whenever this conversation came up last night, some of the first responses were like, well, what do I do? How do I get that conversation started? Like, you can't just casually have a heavy conversation like that with anybody, anywhere, And one thing that kind of came up in my group was, or just something that came to mind when I was in my group leading it, was the story of Job. Like his friends were amazing until they started talking, because they brought up the wrong things. Like, if you want to know the classic example of how to be there for someone in an invitational culture, it's the book of Job. Read the beginning. His friends are amazing examples. They saw his situation. They sat with him in the situation, and they kind of embraced the, like, yeah, we're here with you to kind of be in the situation. Just be your friends and be around. We don't have the answers. It was the moment they started, spitfiring their terrible theology that things kind of went out of whack. As far as your approach, given all the years of ministry that you've had with youth ministry, with adult ministry and all that, with just every side of ministry in the church, is it even worth starting one of those conversations, even if you don't know any of the answers? Like, what's the point of even trying to say something?
Oh, yeah. And I think the reality is there's certain things, and we went over this with my group, is that there's certain things that will resonate with people that the Bible still has a lot to talk about, and certain things that they will absolutely avoid. Mm-hmm. For most people that are millennials or Gen Z, they will avoid all conversations around religion, around God himself, but they will 100% engage in spiritual conversations about spirit, about soul, about heaven, about hell. They want to be spiritual still. And so you take that approach and try to engage in those type of conversations around, what does the Bible actually say about these things?
Yeah.
One of the guys in our group, his whole family is highly Hispanic. And like, you and I actually went over to their house one time because they were talking about demon possession.
No, I remember. Yep.
Yeah.
La Lorena. Never going to forget.
Yeah. So, and they were all open to having conversations about demons and about, hell. And we what are these things? And that's okay. We can have these conversations.
Yeah.
And that was a spiritual conversation that opened up the door to talk a little bit about Jesus and the gospel and what he's done.
Right.
And we can share that.
Yeah.
But you have to know what are the things that they would actually talk about. They will talk about injustice
Yeah.
and what we can actually agree with, that there are injustices, that there
Mhm.
are things that displease God greatly, that he hates, because God condemned Israel for their injustices and what they had
Yeah.
done, you know? And so we can find things that the things that we used to care about then, and the Bible still has a lot to say about it, about like homosexuality and about abortion. These were hot button topics long time ago.
Yeah.
But anymore, people don't want to engage in these conversations. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't want to have this conversation. It's too controversial. They have their mind made up on these things already. Okay.
Yeah.
And so for you to share the gospel in it, you're probably not going to. And you probably don't even want to, because it's really uncomfortable unless you have a type 8 personality or something like that, where you want
Yeah.
to engage and be conflicting.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you never approach truth, but if you're trying to share the gospel for the first time, there's wisdom and tact around it, where you find what is the open door. And the open door often is, what will they actually engage with in your community? What are they open to? What did Paul do when he found all those religious statues, all those gods? He learned their culture. He learned what they were open to. He learned their
Yeah.
prophets. He learned their poets. And that's what it means to become all things to all men, is that you learn all the things that wouldn't normally be interesting to you.
Yeah.
And you find, okay, what is this? What's the spiritual connection? That's how you increase in your knowledge about God, about theology. You can see the connection. People are very interested about nature. The Bible has a lot to say about that. Us as Westerners, we don't understand a lot about it, because we're Western culture. But the Bible has a ton to say about these things, because it was written in that Eastern culture.
Yeah.
And so there's a ton that you can learn. Embrace what is being learned by other people, that you can adapt and learn and twist the gospel to be able to relate with people around it.
Mhm. Yeah. It's one of those things of like, they don't want to hear what you want to say. They want to hear what they need to hear, sort of situations of like, and if you just learn that of like, oh, you need to hear about this because of what's going on here. And this is where you're coming from because of your culture, your context. Got it. Okay. I'll do the work. I don't get all of that because I'm not from that culture or context. Only you know that story, but I'll do the work. I'll figure it out. I'll seek God on that frontier.
This is that listen aspect of bless. Be in prayer. You're praying for them constantly. Who are the people in your silo? You start writing them down. I have a few of them written on my board right here, of people that I am specifically trying to like witness and reach. And then you listen. What are the things? And it's really hard, because you have to sit down, shut up, and listen to, okay, what is the open opportunity here for me to engage with them on?
Yeah.
And so you have to listen and hear that, and then they'll eventually start a conversation with you, and that's what will lead to an opportunity for you to share.
Yeah. And if anyone's thinking of an example, we had it last night. I mean, there were multiple examples, but one of the people in our group is a part of a writing group where they do poetry. They just write stories, short stories, things like that. And this person has a heart for writing about injustice when it comes to racism, right? And this was something that someone in the group, in her writing group, kind of pointed out of like, maybe you shouldn't write about that. That's too controversial, too, um, you know, hot button topic, and it's just one of those nonsense things. And what I was able to do is like, okay, I don't know where you're coming from. I don't get that, obviously, because of how I look, but I can ask questions to understand where you're coming from and how you feel. So to kind of start that conversation, it was like, it sounds like to me you're kind of frustrated with this person. I was like, yeah, I am frustrated. This is what I feel called to write about this, to talk about this. And it was like, can I ask you a difficult question? I was like, sure. Okay. Are you the only person that looks like you in your group? And she said, yes, I am. And I was like, okay, does that bother you sometimes when you try to write about something they don't understand? And she was like, yes. And it got this whole conversation going just because I was listening and asking questions that were actually relevant to her, that no one probably has asked her before, of like actually engaged, of like, yeah, this is a serious thing. And no one actually listens to you in your own group, where the whole point of the group is to do this one thing. And then they're telling you not to do the thing. That's got to be pretty infuriating. It's like if you go to a football game, they tell you not to play football and you're on the team. It's like, what the heck, And I think that's just a good start of like, again, the first letter in the bless of just be attentive, be there, be in the moment, ask those questions. I guess kind of just wrap things up and tie everything together, Andrew. We've talked about how to do things. We've talked about what we're doing, but like, why do we need to, as the people of God, be the ones that reach other people? Like, some people listening to this podcast are probably still under the impression of like, okay, but I still give you money. Like, it's still you, right? You're the one who's on payroll. You're the one who has pastor or whatever in your title. Why do I need to do anything? Why should I care? Like, why do people need to do anything in the first place? Like, is it on all the people of God or just some of them to reach the world?
Yeah. I think it has to come down to your understanding of your relationship with God and what you understand about the Great Commission and what he's tasked, because it's to all believers of you are the one to go out and share this. It's not to any other individual, no matter how uncomfortable you are. You go out and do this and to actually build the relationship, the spiritual relationship, right? Just inviting someone to church, it's fine, but guess what? They're not going to be nearly as interested in what any pastor is saying as opposed to a genuine conversation you have. And a lot of people are generally just scared to just share their faith and share what they've actually said. But when you have a genuine relationship with someone, they're okay. They're okay to have a conversation with you. They're okay to engage with you. They're okay to have a full debate even with you. And they're not going to leave and like never talk to you again if you've done the right thing and have actually listened, if you've been able to serve them, if you have like done the extra things with them and if, like honestly just eaten with them and gotten to know them.
Yeah.
If you're a random stranger, sure, you can bet, because it's very easy for me to dehumanize you at that point and be like, I don't know you, get out of my face.
Yeah.
But if I actually know you, it happens all the time in family where it's like, yeah, I don't agree with everything my sister has to say, even though she's 90% right about stuff. But still, I'd rather argue with her about things, Yeah. And same thing that I know my brother Joseph does with me all the time, where he will just say something and he knows will get me all wild up and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like, in the end, we're still going to have conversations. We're still going to talk to each other, even if we don't agree. But it's the fact that you go out and share with someone. It doesn't depend on what you actually share. It depends on you just being faithful and going out. God is faithful enough and is good enough to correct any wrong things you say. So don't worry about it. I know when I was first witnessing to people and was first sharing my faith, I screwed up all the time. I said wrong things.
Yep,
definitely borderline heresy and probably heresy truly.
Yeah.
But guess what? Those people don't remember those. Those people don't remember what I said.
Yeah.
They remembered the relationship. They remembered the conversation, and they remembered the heart. Like, honestly, that's by the grace of God. It's by the grace of God. They remembered the right things. They heard the right things. And eventually that relationship grew. And that's how they came to saving faith. Mm. And so we need to get out of our heads and stop thinking that we're so important. You just be faithful and talk to them. Just be faithful. That's it. Mm-hmm. So, and be humble. Also realize that you're probably going to say something wrong. If you think you have all the theology right and you're saying all the right things, you're probably wrong and you're probably pissing off a lot of people. So chill out, be humble, be faithful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, as we kind of wrap things up here and give some announcements on, the changes to women's ministry or women's discipleship and just some things happened with Reunion Church. Any final thoughts as far as the conversations that we kind of had last night? Anything that's kind of stood out, or just any final notes on mission statements in general? The mission statement of Reunion Church.
No.
Okay, cool. That made it easy. Hard pivot. For those of you who are a part of Reunion Church or want to be a part of Reunion Church, we do have a couple things. Andrew and myself, along with David and Justin, are going to be building out discipleship groups. If you guys are curious what that means, what it looks like to build a deeper relationship with God, we're building these out. So if you want to join one of these groups, they're going to be a little more intensive conversations. They're going to be a little more thorough. And it's going to be, covering all sorts of topics, kind of like the ones we talked about here on the podcast. So definitely hit us up. Our info will be in the description below. And then for those of you who already know or may not know, women's discipleship is having a quick change in how we're doing things. So you can ask Hannah and Amber for the details, but It's going to be strictly Reunion area people. So they're no longer meeting in Littleton anymore. It'll be primarily in the Reunion area. So for all the ladies and women that were going, just keep that in mind. They're only meeting they're only meeting in Reunion on Wednesday nights. So the Saturday night or the Saturday meeting is no longer taking place. More detail on that, Hannah and Amber can give you all of that information. And then lastly, as we're praying through this new year, new season, getting a worship leader has been in our hearts a lot. If you know anyone who has been, who has that experience, who has the experience and the call to lead worship and disciple people in a worship setting, hit us up. We'd love to talk to them, have a conversation, have a coffee or beer, whatever their preference, and just kind of hear their heart as far as ministry and the ministry of worship. And then lastly,
even if they don't have the experience, but they want to learn and grow in it, like, again, we're all open for anyone that's available for that.
Right. Yeah. And then lastly, we really appreciate your support. We really appreciate your tithes. You can give to us on our website and help support the mission there. And, your tithes and offerings will not go to us. We don't take a penny of it. We work in sales. We don't need your money. So the money that you are tithing, though, is actually going to go to a building that we're trying to get. We're hoping to get some sort of space to have as our own, a sacred space of our own, sometime in 2022, with a full service launch and all that. Could really use your support and prayer in that process.
Well, so to clarify, space of our own, we're not trying to get our own building.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get a bigger space.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a space
not that optimistic.
To rent. Yeah. So if you guys feel called to give, again, you can go to Reunion Church's website and give there and support the cause. And with that, we'll see you guys next week on our next Sunday recap.
Toodles.